There was a lot of noise about Geelong, about the adjustments that they'd made, the risk that they took to blow everything up, to blow the program up, to change the game plan. I think it's important to reflect on that.
We consciously tried to not think about the past at the start of this pre-season.
We just went through a process of saying, hey, what are we good at? Let's try to maximise that stuff as much as possible. And if some of our weaknesses shine through a bit early in the year, we're not going to run away from it. We're going to double down on what we're good at.
It's hard in a handicap competition, so we acknowledge those, but we're just not prepared to give into it. We say to our players, we're going to give you a chance to win it. And so the choice is we can go into our shell or we can be aggressive and go after it.
What a start for the Cats. The moves they've made have turned to instant gold. Launches onto it. Jeremy Cameron, new star. Barrels it home. Here's Rowan. Out. Players out everywhere. Rowan. Holmes. Goal.
We're doubling down even more than we have previous years, that we might cost ourselves a little bit short term, but we're going to try to set up our program to be at our best when it counts. You know, if we finish 9th because we try to prime ourselves to be at our best later in the year, we'll live with that.
Jeremy Cameron for goal number 6. He's got 6.
Bangs it long. Henry's forward. Floyd.
Oh! Wow! He'll send it back long and deep, you sense. He's always been a powerful kick, big pack forms. Oh, Rowan!
The overwhelming sense that I have, and that I'm proud of our players for, is that they believe.
They're going to find a way, and there's a bit of icing on the cake from Hawkins.
We're going to have a crack. You know, we're not going to roll over, and it might not work, and you know, you might be disappointed. You've got to take that emotional risk, but we're going to have a go.
Geelong celebrate. They are through to their 19th grand final.
It's so hard to get to this situation, so embrace the moment.
Embrace it, they will. This great football club are back contending again, and when you listen to that, you would suggest, boys, that everything has almost gone to plan. It is just, if you map the season out, if we had Chris Scott's and his coaching staff who had access to everything that they planned, I reckon, you know, from such a variable game, they would be sitting here going, geez, we've got a lot right so far. It counts for nothing right now, but in terms of preparing his group for what comes on Saturday, geez, I don't think they could have done much better.
Regardless of the result, it has gone to plan in the sense that they have given this group the best opportunity because they have timed it to absolute perfection, and so that was the point that Chris Scott was making, is like, we'll take the hits early, we'll put ourselves out there, and if we fall short, then fine, because we've given ourselves every opportunity to win, and so you got to credit them for that.
I love that too. You got to be able to sell a message to a group when you have a changing game style. I think Collingwood did the same as well. So we're going to live with some vulnerabilities. You know, if we turn the ball over, we may get scored against. Our defenders will be exposed a bit more one-on-one, which we don't see as often in this day and age. But the coach would have sold that to the players. So, boys, we'll live with that. That's okay. We know there's going to be some teething problems to get our game going throughout the season and set us up to win a flag.
The irony of all that is that they have taken it on, they have been bolder and have been more vulnerable behind the footy, but they've been better. Their turnover game, and so I want you to talk about this, both you guys here. So people sitting at home are going, why are you banging on about turnover so much? We can give you all the numbers, and the numbers tell a great story, because this just doesn't happen. That's through the season. It gets even better in the last 6 or 8 weeks. It's up around 30.
Well, just quickly too, there's twice as many turnovers than there are stoppages in a game. So that's why we bang on about it, Gas.
And this is a club that's doing it number one on both sides of the footy. So number one for defending and number one for attacking.
They've always been great at defending it. And let's have a look at what it looks like. So keep De Koning in mind there. So he's on the far wing. So Geelong right now, they're in control of the ball. This is where they're a little bit different. They try to take the game on more through this part of the ground, but at times can make them vulnerable. So you turn it over. Little bit of pressure to sort of tidy it up. All the while, what you're doing right now is you're buying time. So Brisbane get it. Most teams score from this situation, but who was that man on the far side of the wing? It was De Koning. So their ability to get numbers quickly back in line with the ball is the reason that they're the best team in the competition at defending turnovers, because they always start from that position of having that extra number, having that +1.
it's not just one group who, their backline's responsible for defending turnover. No, it's a whole of club.
You can see the work of the half forwards
Correct.
and the mids there. They're the ones that bought the time for De Koning.
They stay connected well. The benefit of being at the ground the last few weeks is we see how connected the half forwards are to the wingers, to the half-backs. So they all work in unison together. And that helps with experience. They've been around and been together for a long time, so no doubt the chemistry is there. But you've got to behold together and have the symmetry for finals that stands up under pressure.
When you've had Tom Hawkins as your figurehead, who's won the goal kicking, I think, 10 years in a row down there, whatever it is, you can be forgiven for going, OK, he's the man. Peripheral players then become just that, a little bit peripheral. But you spoke to Joel Selwood over the weekend? Yeah,
we did. We spoke to Joel on radio, and he basically said that if you'd been playing half forward for Geelong, well, then you would just stand and wait for the ball to get kicked into Tom Hawkins, and you didn't really have a role to play on offence. So let's hear from Joel.
To be honest, if you're playing high half forward for us the last couple of years, it's a really tough position when we move the ball extremely slowly and then go in and kick it to the tools.
So from everything that happened on the other Friday night, the small forwards is what I was taken with, is that the Myers and Close and Stengel, just watching them in action.
So the reason that the half forwards couldn't get involved is because Geelong were a control team. So they were still really good defending turnover, but when they won the ball back from turnover, they would go into a kick mark style. So there's a half forward, there's Close. He's got up the ground, and now they're slingshotting out. When they used to look for a mark, take time, take control, now it's the half forwards, it's the wingers, it's Isaac Smith on a wing, it's Holmes on a wing, and all of a sudden the strengths that you've got, because Chris Scott said, we're going to double down, we're going to take the risk, we're going to be aggressive and go after it. Well, you play to your strengths because you've got Dangerfield in front of the ball. You got Rowan, you got Hawkins, you got Cameron, you got Stengel. You got all these dangerous players that you're giving the best chance to score in one-on-one situations.
So, and then all of a sudden you talked about Hawkins and we've talked about Cameron and Rowan's had his moments and Danger can go forward. Look at these ratings from the weekend.
Yeah,
small forwards.
That's gone to plan. You know, you want to bring the half forwards into it. Have a look at that.
Well, what it does too, it encourages the forwards to run, the half forwards to run and get involved and
that's
get creative.
That's a game rating
Absolutely.
for everyone, by the way, not just small forwards. That's for the whole game.
And that'll challenge Sydney. Because, Sydney's got some really good running defenders, but that'll challenge them as to whether they can... they might be able to run with them, but can they defend them? Say, Florent, Lloyd, Blakey, those types. Yeah. Can they contain these types of guys? So that'll be a really interesting one. Brian Myers is fantastic. 14 disposals at half-time. So he was able to get involved. And I think there may have been a message pre-game that, hey, let's just use up Brian Myers because he's playing on Daniel Rich.
Yeah. So that's the match-up challenge for Sydney. So the obvious match-ups we can talk to now, the Tom McCartan and Tom Hawkins match-up, which is going to be enormous and have a big bearing on it. So that's a record where you go, oh, geez, we hadn't got a handle on Tom Hawkins, but that's as good a record as you can hope.
He'd be smarting at that. If Tommy's seen that record, he'll be sitting out the farm at the moment, just sharpening the iron.
What he would be saying, though, is, hey, if you want to go and strip it back even further, my one-on-one record against Tommy McCartan's really good. Yeah. It's almost a 50% win rate, except the round 2 game, it was the McCartan brothers. So he got one-on-one contest with Tom McCartan for the game. Paddy took 7 intercept marks. So the Paddy McCartan match-up on the weekend is going to be enormous. Now, he had Close in that game. Close kicks 4 goals. Yeah. But he impacts on the Tom McCartan situation.
But the rider on that is that was in its infancy, the new game style.
It was,
and the other games were under the old Geelong model of ball movement. This is a different proposition that they're coming up against.
Yeah, and Rampy's record on Jeremy Cameron's been okay. And Jeremy Cameron was a bit banged up back here, but
better than okay.
That really
does give you confidence, guys, because this is one of the few defences that have got the capability to go with arguably the best key forward combination in the league.
Well, you got 2 that you don't have to think about straight away.
Absolutely, and 2 genuine match winners. Yeah. So we saw last time Hawkins in a grand final, he tore Collingwood's heart out in that second half when he got a hold of Ben Reid and arguably should have won the Norm Smith medal. So he's done it on the big dance. We've seen Cameron a couple of weeks ago in that first final against Collingwood. He can rip them apart. So it's a great challenge, but that gives you some level of comfort if you're a Sydney Swans supporter that they can go with those big boys.
Ruck is the situation we always talk about. We've already lauded Tom Hickey, so he's in career best form and goes in with great confidence. it's hard to... It's Reece Stanley is the nominal ruckman, but there's also so many aspects and parts to this.
Yeah, so we sat up high, level 4 at the MCG on Friday night, and we thought, how does Tom Stewart and De Koning, how do they keep becoming so free? Well, go to the centre bounce. So Stanley is the ruckman, Blitzarves, for all intents and purposes, is the ruck rover. You go to the next stoppage, Blitzarves is taking the ruck. Stanley has gone and played almost as a genuine key defender. The shuffle back occurs, and then it's De Koning there at the bottom of the picture, or it's Tom Stewart playing as the extra. So it took a little bit of time for us to figure out what was going on and how, time and time again, the Geelong could have a key defender like Stewart and De Koning, two of the best interceptors in the game. So it's the mechanism for Geelong. So this week, the Swans know that's coming.
Yeah. And the thing about that was that Stewart wasn't the intercept marker, it was Colajazzi and Henry, because in the end they're looking up at Stewart. They're going, I want to kick there. But they're kicking it all the wrong places and they're just getting picked off. So it was stunning to sit there and watch it.
Were you surprised that Brisbane allowed that to happen?
Well, going into the game, the planning from the two coaching staff, it's disappointing because what's Chris Scott and the Geelong staff thinking? OK, who's going to take this game away from us? Lockie Neal. So they put work in. Atkins onto him, Atkins gets injured, Guthrie, Selwood. So they've got a plan A, got a plan B, got a plan C. For Brisbane's going to the opposition meeting during the week when you present to the players, Tom Stewart had to be item number one. So Tom Stewart, arguably one of the best defenders of our generation, cannot be allowed to sit behind the ball on his own and set up. And obviously get their defensive flow going, if you want to call it that. So, and that just didn't happen. So
within 40 seconds, he was on his own.
Absolutely, within 40 seconds. So that's got to be a planning thing, and then obviously an execution thing with some of the craft, like Hiward leads there when he shouldn't have led, just to open up. But they needed to do a far better job at addressing a great strength for the Geelong Football Club, and that was really disappointing. And not to mention, obviously, disappointment in the key forwards for Brisbane. If you're going to go with three key forwards, they've got to stand up.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? So you go then to the Simon Goodwin comment when Melbourne get bundled out, and he mentioned it. Let's have a listen.
Clubs are no different to what we do. You know, we attack teams' vulnerabilities. And clearly there was a pattern throughout the year of what we struggled with. So as I said, we'll unpack all that as a club. You know, we tried to address it on the run throughout the season. We weren't able to do that to a level where we could get results. You know, we did it to a level to finish second on the ladder, which I'm incredibly proud of, to put yourself in that position. But once again, in finals, it's funny, your vulnerabilities find you. And I heard Dimmer Hardwick talk about it last week with Richmond. They find you in big games when it matters. And if they're not corrected, they'll keep finding you. So we've got to go away and fix it.
And every coach is living that. Your vulnerabilities find you in big finals. So your forwards, your big forwards, you know, you go in and they have a moment against Melbourne where they got hot for a half, but in the end they couldn't mark it. So we'll go through them line by line. So from a Collingwood point of view?
Contest, yeah. So that was an issue for them that Craig McRae said it was unsustainable to be losing contests the way they were week after week after week, but still finding a way. So first half they get smacked and they get smacked on the scoreboard. For Brisbane, their ability to defend was an issue for them all year, and they concede 120 points in the final against Geelong.
Yeah, I think you go through the other teams there. Melbourne, we know clearly their front half's a big concern, and then Fremantle offensively they just really struggle to move the football, don't they? But you know, back onto Brisbane, you know, there's
couple more, I think. We've got Richmond. Again, the defence was their problem, and they got scored heavily against the Lions and the Dogs. The old Bevo, the one that Bevo doesn't like too much, is one-on-one contest.
That's 41% in finals. I think it's sat around 30-odd during home and away as well.
That's why I wanted to move us on and not go to the Bulldogs, because Bevo gets arcs up every time we bring that up. But we go back to Brisbane, and to me, Brisbane weren't a preliminary final team, you know, so they're lucky to beat Richmond, and Melbourne were clear.
They won't like that. You talk about people that won't like that. They won't like you saying that they weren't a preliminary.
No, they weren't. And my major concern, and there's going to need some big tinkering over the off-season when it comes to their list, because I'm concerned about their run. Now, it's no secret that clubs can get access to GPS data on clubs, and there is coaches in the competition that have used that data and shown their playing group when they come up against Brisbane. Hey, look at the difference. Brisbane are down the bottom when it comes to general running in the competition, and that is a concern they need to address in all lines, all over the ground. They've got issues there with the forwards. Obviously, you're playing three big forwards. In the midfield,
just on the forwards, so just do it line by line. So you talked about Geelong, your running capacity of Myers and Close getting up the ground. The year before it was Neil Bullen and Spargo, those types. So goal-kicking threats, yes. Brisbane Lions, ability to cover ground.
Yeah, different make-up forward line, aren't they? They've got a forward line that they're all goal kickers, guys. Whereas you look at the other top teams, you've got those 3 or 4 half forwards can get up and down and help overwhelm the contest, help you turnover game. Midfield, Neil spreads pretty well, but I'm not sure about the other guys and their ability to spread and their run and create there. And then half-back beyond the football. You know, Daniel Rich is obviously challenged in that area. Kadeem Coleman has been good there. When Zorko goes back there, he's been challenged. Archie is challenged in that area. So there is running concerns. And we know if you're in the bottom, 3 or 4 teams in the competition at running ability, that ain't going to get it done in the last fortnight of a season, Gaz. Now, they might not like hearing that, but that's just the reality of it. The modern game, the top teams, they've all got really good runners across the board, especially from their half forwards.
So is that personnel? But so they're going to add Dunkley probably, or Ralphie's going to come and tell us that. So you look at it and do you either go to and throw the gauntlet at the feet of those players and say you've got to get better? Yeah. Because that can happen if you do.
You can become a better runner. You can become a better runner, but it's more than just putting you on the stopwatch and saying you've got to run a 10-minute 3K. The other part of it is actually being selfless and wanting to defend, which I've got big queries on. So have a look at Daniel Rich here. So that's his man that's run over now towards the boundary line. So pause it right there. That's Gary Rowan. Have a look at Daniel Rich here. Do you think he wants to join in on team defence? So he's still looking over. I've got my man covered. Gary Rowan's put 30 metres on him. They could have held hands when they crossed each other, but he had no desire to join in on team defence whatsoever. So it's all right when he's got the footy and he looks beautiful, with the footy because he's a great kick. But time and time and time again, you will see that from Daniel Rich having no interest in joining in on team defence.
It's an interesting decision. You look at Daniel Rich there, and I think they were smart by Geelong. They put Myers on him, and they would have been told, "Hey boys, get it to Myers in the first half."
Neil Bullen the week before. 2
years ago in the prelim final, Gary Ablett Jr. plays in Daniel Rich, and they just kept looking for Gary Ablett Jr. Had a big impact on that prelim final. So, you've got out that aspect. Dane Zorko, at this stage of his career now, probably needs to go to half-back. But then can you have Zorko and Rich both as half-back flankers? So, because clearly Coleman's going to be there.
Do you think changes in terms of the profile and their ability, their athletic profile needs to be looked at?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it's a serious question mark for Lions, and it's an area they need to address.
How brave do you get? There have been teams that have gone to preliminary finals and been seduced by the fact they're into the last 4 in the competition and misread where they're at. Yeah. Is this the situation where maybe it's about going back a step or two and trying to get that mix right? Am I putting words in?
Absolutely. No doubt about it. Because I don't think they were in the top 4 teams in the competition at the end of the year. So they've got a couple of wins.
But the bones are there.
the bones are there. Now, we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater here. But you hope they don't get seduced by that finish. Like, as you said, Gaz, they need to really look at that list closely and look at the athletic profile, because we all know in the modern game you need to be able to run. We've just spoken about those Geelong forwards.
They are a kicking team.
They are a kicking team. And you can be a kicking team. Sydney are a kicking team, but they can really run on all parts of the ground.
Strong stuff. Very, very interesting. Well, you're talking about player movement and trading. It's on, and it's on in earnest. Josh.